Idealists argue that since the ideal is perfect, that's the solution we should use, disregarding any of the other factors which complicate the matter, conditions that are not met, and so on. Here's a perfect example of an idealist arguing for the ideal.
Employers are willing to offer money for a service. Employees are willing to offer a service for money. So you have two conflicting self-interests. The employer is wanting to pay the employee as little as possible for their service, while the employee is wanting to charge the employer as much as possible for their service. Supply and demand is ultimately what determines the price of this service that is being provided.
This is true, but there's two important factors that you're leaving out. First is the employer's ability to manipulate the market. Yes, large employers have the ability to manipulate the employment market. Second is the cost to maintain the employee. Like any piece of equipment, employees do have a maintenance cost.
So let's say that you have this much supply for a service in the marketplace, but this much demand for that service in the marketplace. Well, in order to get the demand to meet the supply, you have to lower the demand by increasing the price of that service. Conversely, if you have this much supply for a service in the marketplace, but only this much demand for that service, then in order to get the demand to meet the supply, you have to increase the demand by lowering the price.
So, let's look at what he's saying in a graph. The green line is demand for employment. The purple line is the natural supply, or the supply in a perfectly free market. This is what the idealist wants to be true. However, that is not the reality of it. The reality of the supply of employment is the yellow line. This is an artificially deflated supply, a market manipulation by large employers. This failure of the free market is what minimum wage is trying to address.
Now, what happens when the government comes in and puts in a minimum wage law? Well, they take away the price mechanism for allowing the demand to meet the supply.
No, they reduce the large employer's ability to manipulate the market. This graph has two new lines, the supply and demand with minimum wage. Yes, there is an obvious supply-side manipulation. Since large employers intentionally manipulate the market, they can and do react with a shift in the supply curve. The goal of minimum wage is to use this manipulation to bring the deflated supply as close to natural supply as possible. This countering of force with force is much more in keeping with real free market ideas than letting large employers manipulate the market at will.
So instead, you're left in a situation where you have only so many employers willing to hire, and they hire some employees, and the rest of those employees, they become unemployed.
Yes, they do become unemployed. This is not because of the implementation of minimum wage. This is not because of the government. This is because of the large employers' manipulation of the market. They intentionally undersupply the market so that there is unemployment, so that they can justify the demand to lower or at least not increase minimum wage. If they fully supplied the market, then this argument would fall apart. It is intentional manipulation by the large employers which results in unemployment, not the minimum wage laws. Jacob makes one last argument against minimum wage in a second video.
If the minimum wage does not cause unemployment, then why not raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour and end poverty as we know it? The reason that proponents of the minimum wage have completely ignored this question is because they know just as well as I do that by doing so you are not going to end poverty, you are just going to increase unemployment.
Minimum wage laws are about countering the manipulation of large employers. It has nothing to do with poverty. Yes, increasing the minimum wage over the natural wage will result in unemployment. Arguing that the minimum wage is above the natural wage is a valid argument and worth further study. In fact, I believe that's the case right now. Given the unemployment rates, the evidence seems reasonably clear that the minimum wage is higher than the natural wage. However, this does not invalidate the minimum wage, it only makes it apparent that there is need for both more flexibility and better data.
For real-world statistics on what happens to businesses that have been affected by the minimum wage, go ahead and check out this article right here.
Thank you for including a source. It is only by finding and refuting bad sources of information that real debate can move forward. The now defunct Tobacco Institute produced propaganda for the tobacco industry. It is stupid to bite the hand that feeds you. The Employment Policy Institute is the same thing, a front for the big money of large employers. I will be addressing the second flaw in your argument, the maintenance cost of employees, and the rest of the second video in my next video about living wages.